So, just when you thought the foreign policy of the United States couldn't possibly get any more vindictive, any more incoherent, or any more blatantly transactional, Donald Trump manages to find a new bottom. And I know, we say rock bottom a lot, but what we are witnessing right now isn't just a diplomatic spat. It isn't just a breach of protocol. This is the United States of America officially turning its back on an entire continent because the president's feelings got hurt. Let's be extremely clear about what is happening here. On Wednesday, Donald Trump took to social media to announce that South Africa, a sovereign nation, a crucial economic hub, and the only African permanent member of the G20, will be banned from the 2026 summit in Miami. Not disinvited, not asked to step aside, banned. Excluded, kicked out like a unruly guest at a country club, which, let's be honest, is exactly how Trump views the G20 because he's literally hosting it at his own golf resort in Doral. He tweeted, and I want to read this so you understand the level of pettiness we are dealing with. South Africa will not be receiving an invitation. South Africa has demonstrated to the world they are not a country worthy of membership anywhere. Not worthy of membership anywhere. Let that sink in for a second. The President of the United States is declaring a G20 nation, an economy that represents the gateway to Africa, unworthy of sitting at the table. And why? Was it because of a war crimes tribunal? Was it because they invaded a neighbor? No. It's because at the last summit, the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, refused to hand over the ceremonial gavel to a junior staffer from the U.S. Embassy. That's it. That is the crime.
Because the Trump administration was too busy boycotting the summit to send a real diplomat, they sent a low-level functionary to accept the presidency of the G20. And when South Africa said, no, we're not doing a photo op with a subordinate, show us some respect, Trump decided to blow up 70 years of diplomatic relations. And honestly, it's pathetic. It is the geopolitical equivalent of taking your ball and going home. But unlike a playground tantrum, this has real, terrifying consequences. We are talking about the immediate cessation of all payments and subsidies to South Africa. We are talking about telling the Global South that if you don't kiss the ring, if you don't play by the MAGA rulebook, you don't just get ignored, you get erased. If you are watching this and feeling like you're taking crazy pills, you are not alone. Because while Trump frames this as strength, the rest of the world sees it for exactly what it is, weakness. It is the desperate flailing of a bully who knows he's losing the room. But here is the reality that the Trump administration doesn't want you to see. This isn't just about South Africa. This is a test run. This is a signal to every other democracy on earth that the United States is no longer a partner. We are a protection racket. And if you don't pay up in praise, in obedience, in deference to the ego of one man, you are out. Now, I want to do something that the mainstream media is failing to do right now. They're covering this as a clash of personalities. They're covering it as Trump versus Ramaphosa. Stop it. That is not what this is. To understand how truly insane this decision is, we have to look at the timeline. We have to look at the receipts. Because when you stack up the forensic evidence of the last 10 months, you realize that this exclusion wasn't a snap decision. It wasn't a tweet in the heat of the moment. It was a premeditated demolition of our relationship with Africa.
Let's look at the record. Back in February 2025, barely a month into his term, Trump suspended aid to South Africa. Why? Because he alleged discrimination against white farmers. Now, keep a pin in that because we're going to come back to how he's laundering white nationalist talking points into official U.S. foreign policy in a minute. Then in March 2025, the State Department expelled the South African ambassador to the U.S., declaring him persona non grata. Did we get a clear reason? No, we got vague gestures towards unfriendly behavior. And then we get to November, the G20 summit in Johannesburg. The United States, the supposed leader of the free world, boycotts the meeting. We didn't send the Secretary of State. We didn't send the Vice President. We sent nobody of consequence. We left an empty chair at the table of the world's most important economic forum because Trump was pouting about unfounded accusations of genocide. So when the closing ceremony comes around and it's time to hand off the presidency to the U.S. for 2026, South Africa is standing there holding the gavel, and the U.S. expects President Ramaphosa to hand the symbol of global economic leadership to who? A junior representative from the embassy? Of course they refused. Any sovereign nation would refuse. It's a breach of protocol so massive it feels calculated. It's a slap in the face. It would be like the Queen of England being asked to hand the crown jewels to a shift manager at Wendy's. It is an intentional humiliation. And when South Africa didn't take the bait, when they stood up and said, "We are a sovereign, constitutional, democratic country," as their statement read, Trump didn't reflect. He didn't apologize. He escalated. He goes on True Social and says South Africa refused to hand off the G20 presidency to a senior representative. That is a lie. He knows it's a lie. There was no senior representative there. That's the whole point. He created a vacuum and then attacked South Africa for noticing the vacuum exists.
But wait, it gets worse, because it's not just about who he is kicking out, it's about who he is bringing in. In the same breath that he banned South Africa, sources are confirming that the administration plans to invite Poland to participate at an elevated level. He is essentially trying to swap out a permanent member of the G20 representing the entire African continent for a guest invitee that just so happens to be led by a far-right populist government that has been sucking up to him for years. Poland's president, Karol Nawrocki, met with Trump in September, and what did Trump say? It's right next to the airport. It's the best location. It's beautiful. He's talking about his golf course. He is determining the composition of the G20 based on who complements his real estate portfolio. This is the transactional rot at the core of this administration. South Africa, a nation that has dared to criticize U.S. policy, dared to take independent stances on global conflicts, is unworthy. But Poland, whose leadership strokes his ego, they get a front row seat at Doral. And let's not gloss over the venue, the great city of Miami, the Doral Golf Resort. He is hosting the G20 at his own property. Again, he is funneling millions of taxpayer dollars and foreign dignitary spending directly into his own pocket, and he is using the guest list as a velvet rope to keep out the critics. This isn't diplomacy. This is a mob boss deciding who gets into the social club. And the reason he cites the specific justification for cutting off funding is genocide against white farmers. We need to pause here, because this is where it goes from petty to dangerous. The white genocide in South Africa narrative is a long debunked white supremacist conspiracy theory. It has been fact-checked into oblivion by every reputable human rights organization on the planet. Are there crime issues in South Africa? Yes. Is there a state-sponsored genocide against white people? Absolutely not.
But Donald Trump doesn't care about facts. He cares about the narrative. He's taking a talking point from the darkest corners of the internet, from the message boards of 4chan and the rallies of white nationalists, and he's stamping it with the seal of the President of the United States. He's using the immense power of the U.S. Treasury to punish a black majority nation based on a racist lie. Make no mistake, this is not about human rights. If Trump cared about human rights, he wouldn't be cozying up to dictators in North Korea or ignoring atrocities when they are committed by his allies. This is about signaling. He is signaling to his base that he is the defender of white heritage globally, even if it means burning down our relationship with the strongest democracy in Africa. And the result? He's effectively pushing South Africa and, by extension, the rest of the continent directly into the arms of China and Russia. If the US says you are not worthy, do you think they're just going to sit there and cry? No, they're going to turn to BRICS. They're going to turn to the partners who don't treat them like children. Trump thinks he's isolating South Africa. He's isolating the United States. He's looking at a map of the world, seeing a continent of 1.3 billion people, the fastest growing population on Earth, and saying, we don't need you. It is strategic suicide. It is moral bankruptcy. And it's happening right in front of our faces. But if you think this started last Wednesday, you haven't been paying attention. This is not an isolated incident. This is not a glitch in the matrix. This is the culmination of a decade-long obsession. To understand why Donald Trump is willing to burn down the US-Africa relationship over a handshake, we have to zoom out. We have to look at the pattern, because he's been telling us exactly who he is regarding South Africa for years.
Let's rewind to August 2018. Do you remember the tweet? I know, it feels like a lifetime ago, but it is the Rosetta Stone for understanding this moment. Trump tweeted that he had asked Secretary of State Pompeo to closely study, and I quote, the South Africa land and farm seizures and expropriations and the large-scale killing of farmers. Where did he get that from? Was it an intelligence briefing? Was it a State Department cable? No, he got it from Tucker Carlson. He watched a segment on Fox News that laundered white nationalist talking points about white genocide. And within 20 minutes, he made it the foreign policy of the United States. That is the pattern. He takes a fringe, race-baiting conspiracy theory, he elevates it to the presidential level, and he uses it as a cudgel to attack a black majority government. He did it in 2018 to signal to his base that their people were under attack globally. And now, in 2025, he is doing it again. But this time, he has the power to weaponize the U.S. Treasury to back it up. And look at the hypocrisy. This is the man who talks about sovereignty first. He tells the UN that every nation has the right to determine its own destiny. He cheers on Brexit. He cheers on Orban in Hungary. But when South Africa exercises its sovereignty, when it takes a stance on Israel at the ICJ, or when it refuses to join a US-led sanctions regime against Russia, suddenly sovereignty doesn't apply. Suddenly, they are ungrateful. This is the shut up and dribble of geopolitics, and it's not just South Africa. Look at how he treated the AGOA negotiations earlier this year. The Trump administration threatened to kick South Africa out of the trade deal, which supports tens of thousands of jobs, not because of trade violations, but because South Africa dared to host a joint naval exercise with Russia and China.
Now, do I love that South Africa is cozying up to Putin? No. I think it's a strategic mistake. But let's be real. India buys Russian oil. Saudi Arabia cuts oil production to help Russia. Does Trump threaten to ban India from the G20? Does he cut off payments to the Saudis? Of course not. Because he likes MBS. He likes Modi. He doesn't like Ramaphosa. And more importantly, he doesn't respect the continent Ramaphosa represents. Remember, this is the man who in his first term referred to African nations as S-hole countries. That wasn't a gaffe, that was a worldview. He views the global south not as partners, but as subjects. And when a subject stands up and demands to be treated like an equal, like South Africa did at the closing ceremony, he views it as a rebellion that must be crushed. This is punishment. Plain and simple. He is trying to make an example out of them. He is telling the world, look what happens when you embarrass me. Look what happens when you don't play along with my photo ops. And who benefits from this? Who is popping champagne corks right now? Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. They don't even have to try anymore. The United States is doing their work for them. For 20 years, China has been pitching Africa on a simple message. The West is arrogant, they will lecture you, they will sanction you. We just want to do business. And for 20 years, American diplomats have tried to counter that by saying, no, we are the partners of democracy, we are the partners of stability, and then Donald Trump comes along and bans the most industrialized nation in Africa from the premier global economic forum because his feelings got hurt. Xi Jinping is going to walk into the next BRICS summit, point to Miami, and say, see, they don't want you. We do. And he will be right. The United States is unilaterally abdicating its seat at the table of influence in Africa. We're creating a vacuum that our adversaries are thrillingly happy to fill.
So where does this go? What happens next? If this is allowed to stand, if the Republican Party, the media, and the international community treat this as just another Trump being Trump moment, we are looking at the end of the post-war diplomatic order. We are moving from a world of alliances to a world of patronage. Think about the precedent this sets for the G20. The G20 was created to handle global financial crises. It includes autocracies, democracies, allies, and rivals. That's the point. It's the one room where everyone sits down. If the host country can simply ban members they don't like, the G20 is dead. It ceases to be a global forum and becomes a Friends of Trump fan club. Next year in Miami, we aren't going to see a summit on climate change or global poverty or food security. We're going to see a pageant of sycophants. We are going to see Poland and Hungary and maybe Argentina all lining up to praise the dear leader at his golf course, while the countries that actually represent the future of the global economy, the Indias, the Brazils, the Indonesias, look on in horror. And what happens when Brazil hosts? Do they ban the US? What happens when China hosts? This is a race to the bottom, and we just cut the brakes. But the stakes are even higher for us here at home, because this foreign policy isn't designed for the world. It's designed for you. Trump is using foreign policy to train the American public to accept cruelty as strength. He is training us to believe that America first means everyone else last. He is validating the white nationalist grievance complex that says we are being replaced and we have to fight back.
By validating the white genocide myth in South Africa, he's validating the Great Replacement theory in the United States. They are two sides of the same coin. He is telling his base, I will fight for white people in Pretoria and I will fight for white people in Pennsylvania. It is a dog whistle so loud it's shattering windows. And if we don't call it out, if we let the media both sides this into a debate about diplomatic protocol, we are complicit. We have to demand better. We have to support the diplomats who are resigning in protest. We have to amplify the voices in Congress who are trying to block these funding cuts. We have to look at our friends in South Africa and say, this man does not speak for all of us. Because if we don't, we are going to wake up in 2027 in a world where America is alone. A world where we are isolated, despised, and surrounded by adversaries we helped create. Trump thinks he's kicking South Africa out of the club. The reality is, he's locking the door to the clubhouse from the inside. And he's trapping us in there with him. The world is moving on. The question is, are we going to let him drag us down with him? I'm Ethan Cole. Don't just watch, subscribe, because we're going to need each other for what comes next.